I want you to take a second and actually visualize how you typically describe love.
Right, like the actual words you use day to day.
Exactly, because when we talk about romance in really basic everyday terms, there is this underlying expectation that it's supposed to be this very, I don't know, gentle, almost peaceful progression.
Yeah, it's treated like a completely linear, safe path.
Right. It's treated like a checklist. You know, you meet someone nice at a coffee shop, you go on a few dates, you fall in love, you get married, and that's the story.
It sounds calm. It sounds safe.
Yeah, but the reality of how we talk about love when we really want to be precise, when we tap into the advanced vocabulary and the actual idioms we use to describe these feelings is completely different.
Oh, it's totally different.
When you step into that world, that calm, orderly checklist is immediately thrown out the window. The linguistic landscape we use to define romance isn't peaceful at all. Honestly, it's chaotic.
It's chaotic and, honestly, it's violent.
Yes.
It is the absolute definition of intense. When you look closely at the architecture of our language, it becomes undeniably clear that at a higher level of emotional articulation, love is almost never described as a gentle stroll.
Right. We just completely abandon the language of simple affection.
We do. Instead, we start using the vocabulary of, like, overwhelming physical forces. We are talking about sudden shifts in gravity, blacksmith hammers, ancient ceremonies, and devastating shipwrecks.
Which is exactly what we are going to explore today. Welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive where we are going to unpack the hidden architecture of romance.
I am so excited for this one.
Me too. Our mission today is to look at a linguistic masterclass on how our most advanced English vocabulary completely transforms the gentle idea of love into the cinematic, uncontrollable force.
It really is cinematic.
It is. We're going to tear down the medieval, the nautical, and the psychological metaphors that you and I unknowingly use every single day to describe the life cycle of a relationship.
And what's truly fascinating here is how much history and psychology is just hiding in plain sight in our everyday conversations.
Right. Like we just say these phrases without even thinking about them.
Exactly. We use them without ever thinking about the literal carnage or the intense survival mechanics they originally described.
So let's jump right into the deep end, right at the very beginning of a relationship, the initial attraction.
The spark.
Great, the spark. When a romance first begins, the vocabulary we reach for relies incredibly heavily on these intense, almost brutal physical metaphors.
Specifically, we talk about sweeping someone off their feet and being smitten.
Yes. And I have to say, when you really listen to those phrases, they sound less like a beautiful date and more like a trip to the emergency room.
They absolutely do. It really sounds like a severe health hazard when you break it down to its literal components.
Let's examine that first one, sweeping someone off their feet.
Yeah, to understand why we use this for love, we have to look at the physics of the metaphor. I want you to really picture the physical scenario this describes.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
You are standing outside. You are perfectly balanced. Your feet are planted firmly on the earth.
Right, I'm just walking down the street. I have my schedule. I have my coffee. I am completely in control of my Tuesday.
Precisely. You are grounded, stable, and you have complete conscious control over your own body and your own trajectory. And then, without any warning,
Bam. Yeah.
A massive, overwhelming physical force hits you. The imagery here originates from the sheer, terrifying power of the natural world.
Like what kind of force?
Think of a sudden, violent gale of winds or a massive, rushing wave of water hitting a coastline. It strikes you with such incredible, concentrated momentum that your feet literally leave the ground.
Oh, wow. So you are instantly suspended in midair.
Yes, you are completely carried away by a force that is exponentially stronger than your own mass.
Yeah.
In that split second, you have zero friction, zero traction, and absolute zero control over where you are going.
Wait, so you're telling me the root of one of our most romantic phrases is basically being violently knocked over by a natural disaster?
That is exactly what it is.
That seems completely counterintuitive to the idea of a gentle mutual romance. We use this to describe a nice date. Someone says, "Oh, he completely swept me off my feet." And we smile and say, "How romantic."
Right, we think it's sweet.
But they are essentially equating a suitor to a hurricane taking their legs out from under them.
That is the exact paradox of the idiom. In romance, someone wooing you spectacularly is equated to a total loss of physical autonomy.
Wow.
If someone sweeps you off your feet, they are coming at you with grand, undeniable gestures. Maybe they rent out an entire restaurant.
Or they surprise you with tickets to Paris.
Exactly. Or they just hit you with this undeniable, overwhelming charisma. They hit you with so much sudden romantic momentum that all of your logical hesitation, all your careful planning for that Tuesday is just obliterated.
You literally lose your footing in your own life.
You do. You have no ground to stand on.
Which is incredibly romantic on the surface, but also profoundly terrifying if you think about the psychological implications.
Oh, it's terrifying.
It implies that to truly experience the magic of falling in love, you must first be rendered completely helpless. You have to be carried away against your will.
Yes. It frames true love as a total surrender. And this directly connects to the second, even more violent idiom for initial attraction.
Being smitten.
Being smitten.
Oh, this one is fascinating. It sounds so archaic and beautiful, like something out of a Shakespearean sonnet.
It does sound delicate, doesn't it?
It really does. But the backstory is heavy, literally heavy.
It is incredibly heavy and not at all delicate. Smitten is one of those gorgeous older words that we use today to describe an intense, blinding infatuation.
Like when you aren't thinking clearly anymore.
Right, when you're totally captivated by someone.
Ah.
But the root of this word is the Old English verb to smite.
And just to be clear, we are not talking about gentle taps or a playful nudge here.
Not at all. Historically, to really grasp this, we have to transport ourselves to a medieval setting. I want you to imagine the deafening noise, the smoke, and the blistering heat of a medieval forge.
Okay, a blacksmith shop.
Yes, a blacksmith is standing over a massive steel anvil. He raises a heavy iron hammer. We're talking a tool designed to shape solid metal, and he brings it down with bone-crushing force onto a glowing piece of iron.
Oh, wow.
He is smiting the iron. Alternatively, imagine a chaotic medieval battlefield.
Right, like knights and swords.
Exactly. A knight is swinging a massive broadsword, striking his enemy to the ground. That is what it means to smite. It is the delivery of a devastating, incapacitating physical blow.
So let me get this straight. When I tell my friend, I saw them across the room at the party and I was immediately smitten, I am idiomatically saying I just got hit in the chest with the blacksmith's hammer.
You are.
We always picture Cupid shooting us with this delicate, precise little arrow, but the language suggests Cupid actually just dropped an anvil on my head.
That is a brilliant way to put it. Yes, Cupid dropped an anvil on you. You have been struck by a massive blow and left completely powerless on the floor.
That is wild.
That is precisely the imagery our language relies on. You have been incapacitated by how charming or beautiful this person is. The blow was so heavy that you literally cannot function normally.
You are paralyzed by the infatuation.
Completely paralyzed.
This really raises a major philosophical question for me about how we process our own emotions.
How so?
Well, if we look at these two foundational concepts for early romance, a sudden loss of gravity where we are swept away by wind or water and being struck down by a medieval weapon, does this imply that human beings subconsciously view initial attraction as a violent, unavoidable accident?
That's a really deep question.
Like, are we basically saying that love is a natural disaster that we have absolutely no defense against?
That... Psychologically, human beings are terrified of vulnerability.
Oh, absolutely.
We don't want to believe that we actually choose to be entirely infatuated. Because if it's a conscious choice, then we are entirely responsible for the risks involved.
Right, because if I choose to love you and you break my heart, it's my fault for choosing you.
Exactly. The blame falls entirely on you. You made a bad investment.
That makes so much sense.
But if it's a hurricane, if it's a blacksmith's hammer swinging out of the dark, then we're completely absolved of the responsibility. We are merely the victims of a beautiful catastrophe.
The language frames love as a primordial force of nature that supersedes human logic.
It does. It allows us to say, well, I couldn't help myself. I was swept away. I was smitten. It takes the burden of choice completely out of the equation.
But of course, human nature being what it is, we absolutely hate being powerless for very long.
Oh, we despise it.
We despise the feeling of having no control. So once these unpredictable, uncontrollable forces of physics and gravity have struck us, what is our immediate reaction?
We try to regain control of the situation.
Exactly. We try to frantically put our feet back on the solid ground. And this shift in mindset moves us entirely out of the chaotic realm of physics and straight into the cold, calculated realm of strategy.
Yes, because surrendering to gravity might sound poetic when you're talking to your friends, but in the actual moment, it leaves you entirely exposed.
Because if you are suspended in the air, you can be dropped.
Precisely. You can be dropped, and that hurts. So not every courtship is as simple as just surrendering to that initial impact.
Right.
Very often, a person who is entirely, completely smitten.
Someone who has absolutely been hit by the medieval hammer.
Right, someone with an anvil on their head decides they need to regain the upper hand. They decide to play hard to get.
Let's really unpack this, because this idiom is a complete 180-degree turn. We go from natural disasters to the boardroom.
We really do.
This isn't poetry anymore. This is a strict economic principle.
It is pure, unadulterated economics. Playing hard to get is the absolute core principle of scarcity applied to human affection.
Scarcity.
Yeah, scarcity. In economics, humans inherently place a much higher value on resources that are rare, difficult to obtain, or heavily guarded.
Like diamonds.
Exactly. If diamonds were as common as gravel on your driveway, they would be functionally worthless. We prize what we have to struggle to acquire.
So in the context of romance, playing hard to get is the deliberate manufacturing of scarcity.
Yes. You act slightly distant.
You pretend you are incredibly busy with work or hobbies.
Right. You feign this mild, polite disinterest, even if internally your heart is beating 1,000,000 miles an hour.
You create a sense of mystery.
And by doing this, you are forcing the romantic pursuer to work harder, to chase you, and to actively prove their devotion and their worth to you.
Wow, you are artificially inflating your own market value.
You are taking back the control that the hurricane stole from you. Think about a very practical, modern example of these mechanics in action, the psychology of the text message.
Oh, texting is the worst for this.
It really is. Imagine you get a text from someone you are absolutely desperate to talk to. Every fiber of your being wants to reply instantly.
But you don't.
No, instead, you deliberately put the phone face down. You wait 2 whole days to text them back.
Oh, the psychological agony of the read receipt. It's
Yeah.
brutal.
It is so brutal. You let them sit in the silence. You let them wonder what you're doing, who you are with, whether you care at all.
Which theoretically makes them desire it even more.
Right. You make them intensely feel the scarcity of your attention.
But I have to push back on this because it feels so cynical. Doesn't this completely strip the magic out of courtship?
How do you mean?
Well, if someone is already smitten, if they've already been hit by the hammer and they know they want, this person isn't feigning disinterest, a massive, almost toxic paradox.
It definitely sounds like one.
It feels like we are turning this beautiful, chaotic romance into a calculated supply and demand graph. Are we really just trading vulnerability for a business transaction?
It's a very valid critique, and it does sound incredibly cynical on the surface. But if we look at the psychology behind it, it makes perfect sense as a mechanism of self-preservation.
Self-preservation.
Yeah. Being swept off your feet, as we established, is terrifying.
Yeah.
Playing hard to get is a defensive armor.
Okay, I see.
It allows you to test the structural integrity of the other person's interest before you fully, irreversibly surrender to the fall.
You're trying to figure out if they actually care or if they are just enjoying the thrill of the chase.
Exactly. You are implicitly saying, I know I'm falling, but I need to know if you are willing to jump after me, to put in the actual work before I show you my hand.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's strategic, yes, but it's a strategy born out of the sheer existential panic of being deeply in love. You make them climb the wall just to ensure they actually want to be in the castle.
You are testing the waters before you let the current take you out to sea. But eventually, the chasing, the artificial scarcity, the strategic economic games,
Yeah,
they have to end, right?
they do. You can't play hard to get forever, or the person will just assume you're actually impossible to get and they'll walk away.
Right. When that supply and demand finally balances out, and these two people decide they're going to drop the armor and permanently commit to one another, the language shifts again.
It shifts drastically.
We move away from medieval battles and economics, and we enter the realm of ancient traditions and maritime survival.
Which brings us to the phrase we use when two people finally decide to commit to marriage. They decide to tie the knot.
Tie the knot. This is one of the most universally understood idioms we have.
And what is truly brilliant about it is its incredibly rich, dual history. It operates on 2 completely different historical tracks that merged into one idea.
The history here is so vivid. Let's look at the nautical origins first, because it ties directly back into this idea of physical forces.
Yeah, if you look at this from a maritime perspective, a knot is quite literally a matter of life and death.
Right out on the ocean.
Exactly. A knot tied by a master sailor on a ship isn't just meant to hold 2 pieces of rope together lightly. It is uniquely mathematically engineered to become tighter and fundamentally stronger the more pressure is applied to it.
Wait, really? The pressure doesn't break it?
Not if it's the right knot. Think about when a brutal storm hits the ocean. The ship is tossed around, the masts are bending, and the ropes are screaming with physical tension.
Okay.
A true sailor's knot will never break under that stress. In fact, it uses the very force trying to pull it apart to secure itself even more firmly. The tension actually locks the fibers together.
Oh, I absolutely love that. The idea of pressure acting as a binding agent.
It's a beautiful concept.
It's like a marriage is a massive canvas sail on a ship caught in a brutal storm. The wind, which represents all of life's inevitable hardships.
The financial stress, the illnesses, the family tragedies.
Exactly. Job losses, whatever. That wind is pulling violently at the sail, trying to rip it away from the mast. But instead of the sail tearing off and flying into the ocean, that very stress, that violent pulling, is exactly what pulls the foundational knot tighter.
Yes.
The external stress makes the internal union more secure.
That is a perfect, beautiful analogy. It takes the violence of the outside world and uses it to fortify the bond between the two individuals.
It says that a true commitment doesn't just survive adversity, it requires adversity to reach its maximum strength.
Exactly. But as I mentioned, that's only half the history. We also have to look at the ancient traditions of the Celtic and Scottish peoples.
Oh, right, where tying the knot was not a metaphor at all.
No, it was entirely literal. The ritual was called hand fasting.
Hand fasting.
Yes, hand fasting was an actual physical ceremony.
Yeah.
During a marriage, the bride and the groom would stand face to face,
Okay.
and their hands and wrists would be physically bound and wrapped together with a long ribbon
Wow, literally tied together.
or a cord or a specialized piece of tartan fabric. The officiant would literally tie a knot around their joined hands.
Which is such a tactile public display of commitment.
It truly is. It was a highly visible physical manifestation of an unbreakable union. Two entirely separate, independent entities being voluntarily bound into one single knot.
They are tethered together.
So when we say we're tying the knot today, we are invoking both the nautical engineering of surviving a storm and the ancient magic of binding two lives together with a ribbon.
It's amazing how this phrase has survived centuries to become just the standard casual way we say, oh, we're getting married.
It really is.
But, that wedding day with all its beautiful ribbons and unbreakable knots and celebrations and cake, that really represents the absolute peak of romantic excitement.
It's the climax of the story in the movies. The credits roll right after the knot is tied.
But in real life, the couple eventually has to step out of that poetry. They have to take the ribbons off their hands, go home, and step into the real world.
And that transition from the poetry of the wedding to the prose of a Tuesday morning is often quite a shock to the system.
It really is. And this is where we encounter the idiom used to describe the moment that early romantic magic inevitably begins to fade. We say that the honeymoon phase is over. I think we need to really contrast what the literal honeymoon is versus what the end of the metaphorical phase represents. Because a literal honeymoon is that traditional vacation a couple takes immediately after they tie the knot.
And what is it characterized by? Pure, uninterrupted bliss. Absolute luxury.
You are sitting on a white sand beach. Someone is bringing you drinks with little umbrellas in them.
And you have zero real-world responsibilities.
Yeah.
You aren't thinking about the electric bill or who needs to take the trash out or the fact that your car needs a new transmission.
Right. It is an entirely artificial paradise.
It is a curated bubble designed to prolong the magic of the wedding. But modern psychology has borrowed this term, the honeymoon phase, and expanded it.
Expanded it to what?
To describe the early, flawless, intoxicating stage of almost any new situation. You can have a honeymoon phase with a new romantic partner, yes. Or they can do no wrong and their quirks are adorable.
But you can also have a honeymoon phase when you move to a brand new city. Right.
Exactly. Or when you start a new job.
Oh, absolutely. The first month at a new job is the classic honeymoon phase. The office coffee tastes great, the boss seems incredibly supportive, your desk is clean, and you haven't realized that the printer has been jammed since 2019.
It's perfect.
But then, inevitably, the phase ends. When we say the honeymoon phase is over, it signifies that reality has forcefully intruded upon the fantasy.
The artificial paradise dissolves, the bubble pops, and the actual difficult, highly unglamorous work of maintaining the situation must begin.
The honeymoon is over, the suitcases are unpacked, and now we actually have to live here.
Right. Think about a painfully relatable example in a romantic context. A couple might go an entire year living in pure infatuation.
Everything is easy?
They never argue. They finish each other's sentences. They're completely synchronized. And then suddenly they find themselves having a furious, resentful argument over who was supposed to wash the dishes in the sink.
So, what does this actually say about our perception of love over time? Does saying the honeymoon phase is over imply that the initial love, that incredible feeling of being swept off your feet, was just a temporary illusion?
That's a great question.
Was it a trick? Are we saying that the arguing over the dirty dishes is the true relationship and everything before that was just a biological cocktail of dopamine designed to get us to stick around long enough to deal with the chores?
That is the perennial philosophical question of long-term romance.
Yeah.
Is the poetry the reality, or is the prose the reality? Is the vacation the truth, or is the Tuesday morning the truth?
Right.
If we connect this back to our earlier nautical metaphors, I think it provides a clearer picture. Perhaps the initial blast of wind that sweeps you away is entirely real, but a storm can't last forever. The atmosphere eventually has to stabilize.
You can't live in a hurricane.
Exactly, you can't. The dishes, the chores, the daily routine that represents the stabilization of the atmosphere. It's not that the early love was a lie or an illusion. It's that it was a temporary, unsustainable state of extraordinarily high energy.
I like that.
The true test of the nautical knot isn't when you are tied up securely in the safe harbor of the honeymoon, drinking margaritas. The true test is when the daily grind applies slow, consistent pressure over decades.
And for some couples, the end of that honeymoon phase is just the beginning of a really mature, beautiful, stable partnership. They figure out a system for the dishes, they communicate, and they pull the knot tighter.
The transition is successful.
Right. But for others, that reality is just too harsh. The pressure is too much, the wind is too strong, the knot was tied incorrectly, and the relationship enters a state of severe crisis.
And when that crisis occurs, the vocabulary returns directly to the ocean.
Which is incredibly fitting.
It really is. The ocean is vast, it is largely uncontrollable, and it can be profoundly, ruthlessly dangerous. When relationships cannot survive the intrusion of reality, they tend to end in one of two ways.
They either end violently or they end quietly.
Yes. And both of these endings use the imagery of the sea to describe human heartbreak.
Let's start with the violent end. The idiom here is being on the rocks. Now, usually if I'm at a restaurant and I ask the bartender for something on the rocks, I just want my drink poured over ice.
Right, it's refreshing. It's a Friday night.
But in the context of human relationships, being on the rocks is not refreshing. It is a terrifying, devastating shipwreck metaphor.
It is the ultimate disaster scenario for a union. I want you to picture the scene as vividly as possible to understand the gravity of the phrase.
Okay.
Imagine a magnificent, incredibly expensive, beautifully crafted wooden sailing ship. This ship represents the relationship. For years, this ship has sailed gracefully over deep, blue, safe waters.
It has navigated through life beautifully, carrying these two people.
But suddenly, a severe, unexpected storm hits. The winds, which, as we discussed, represent the arguments, the betrayals, the financial ruin, the massive breaches of trust, push this beautiful ship entirely off course.
It gets pushed out of the safe, deep, navigable water, and it is forced into the shallow, highly dangerous coastal waters.
Yes. And hiding just beneath the churning, white-capped surface of those shallow waters are massive, jagged stone rocks.
Oh, wow.
The ship is thrown against them by the waves. You have to imagine the violent crash of the heavy wooden hull slamming into the immovable stone.
The sound of that would be awful.
It would be deafening. You can hear the thick, structural wood cracking, splintering, and groaning under the immense pressure. The ship is completely immobilized. It is stuck on the jagged stones, unable to move forward or backward, and freezing seawater is pouring into the hull through the cracks.
Wow. So if a marriage or even a major business partnership is described as being on the rocks, we aren't just saying they are having a bad week or they are annoyed with each other.
Not at all.
We are saying that this entity is in extreme life-threatening distress. It is suffering massive, potentially irreparable structural damage, and it is in highly imminent danger of total and complete destruction.
It is a hair's breadth away from sinking to the bottom of the sea.
That is so intense.
It implies an absolute state of emergency. The relationship requires immediate, desperate, monumental intervention, like a rescue boat or a helicopter, or it will absolutely perish.
So when a relationship is on the rocks, there is yelling, there's panic, there is the violent, deafening sound of breaking wood.
It is trauma.
It's loud. It's a loud, crashing, chaotic end. But then we contrast this massive shipwreck with the other ocean metaphor, the heartbreakingly gentle, silent metaphor of drifting apart.
Yeah.
Honestly, this one gives me chills because of how quiet it is compared to the rocks.
Drifting apart is perhaps one of the most melancholic phrases we have in the entire English language. Because there is no storm here. There is no violent wind, no jagged stones.
Right.
I want you to imagine two small boats floating right next to each other on a completely calm, glass-like sea. The sun is shining. There is no violence. There is no hatred. There is no massive, catastrophic argument or betrayal.
But underneath the calm surface, down in the dark depths where you can't see them, there are invisible ocean currents.
Yes, and they are slowly, relentlessly moving.
Because these two boats are no longer tied together, going back to our nautical knot, the knot has slowly come undone over time. These silent currents gently begin to pull the boats in completely opposite directions.
And the true tragedy of it is the total lack of awareness. The movement is so slow and so silent that if you were sitting in one of those boats, you don't even feel it happening.
There is no jolt.
No jolt at all. You are just reading your book, looking at the sky, thinking everything is absolutely fine. And then one day you finally look up from your book and you realize the other boat isn't next to you anymore.
It is miles and miles away, a tiny speck shrinking on the horizon.
Exactly.
It really makes me think of tectonic plates shifting beneath the earth. You know, you wake up on a Tuesday, you have your coffee, you go to work, you kiss your partner goodbye.
Just a normal day.
Right. You don't feel the tectonic plates moving beneath your feet. The earth doesn't shake. It's a fraction of a millimeter of movement. But you string enough of those invisible, unremarkable Tuesdays together, and suddenly, years later, you look across the kitchen table and realize you and your partner are living on completely different continents.
That is a brilliant analogy.
There is a massive, unbridgeable ocean between you, and you have no idea exactly when it happened.
The tectonic plates, much like the ocean currents, represent the tiny, unnoticed daily changes in human interests, or the slow accumulation of emotional distance.
Right, like maybe one person starts a highly demanding new career that consumes their thoughts.
And the other person finds a new passion project or a new group of friends. There is no animosity. There's no villain in the story. But the slow divergence of focus acts like that invisible current.
To drift apart means to lose that emotional connection naturally over a long period.
It's the quiet, almost painless tragedy of simply outgrowing one another.
Whether a relationship violently crashes against jagged stones in a storm, or it silently, tragically drifts miles apart across a calm sea, you'd think that would be the definitive end of the story.
You would think so.
The boats are gone, the sea is empty. But the human heart can be incredibly, sometimes foolishly stubborn. Which brings us to our final and maybe most lingering psychological idiom.
When a relationship has definitively ended, the ship has sunk or sailed away. But a person continues to love their ex-partner.
Sometimes for years.
Sometimes for an entire lifetime. We say that they are carrying a torch for them.
This one has such a profoundly romantic, almost cinematic historical setting. To really feel the weight of this phrase, we have to rewind time for a second. We have to go back to a time before electric streetlights, before smartphones, before GPS navigation.
You have to imagine a night that is pitch black.
The kind of oppressive, suffocating darkness we rarely experience in the modern illuminated world.
True, absolute darkness, where you cannot see your own hand in front of your face. And in this historical context, imagine standing outside your home, on a hill or a coastline, in that freezing ink-black night. You are holding a burning torch.
You are doing this because you are waiting for someone you deeply love to return from a long, highly dangerous journey.
Maybe they are off fighting a war, or they are on a perilous sea voyage, or an overland expedition.
And you are holding that fire for two very specific reasons, right?
What are they?
Well, first, the light. You are trying to pierce the darkness so that if they are lost out there in the cold, if they are wandering in the woods, they can see a beacon. They can see the fire guiding them back to your door.
Right.
And second, the warmth. The fire proves that even in the cold and the dark, you haven't gone to sleep. You haven't given up. You are still there, you are still awake, and you are still waiting for them.
It is the ultimate historical symbol of unwavering fidelity and hope against all odds. Today, when we say someone is carrying a torch, it translates to secretly maintaining a deep, enduring, and incredibly passionate love for someone long after a breakup.
Or even in the case of unrequited love, where the person never actually loved you in the first place, but you maintain the devotion anyway.
Exactly. It is the act of keeping that flame alive in the darkness of your own heart and refusing to move on.
Refusing to let the fire go out, even when everyone else tells you it's time to go inside.
It's an internal, deeply private fire, The person they love may have moved to a different city, they may have married someone else a decade ago, they may have an entirely new life.
But internally, psychologically, the person carrying the torch is still standing on that dark, freezing hill, holding the light.
Hoping the person will miraculously see the beacon and find their way back.
Which makes me deeply question the modern utility of this entire concept.
That's so.
In the pitch-black past, holding a literal torch was a functional lifeline. It was a physical necessity to keep someone alive and guide them home. But in modern romance, is carrying a torch for a decade truly a romantic, noble act of loyalty?
It's a tough question.
Or is it just a tragic, self-destructive refusal to accept reality? Are we just romanticizing our inability to heal and accept that the ship is already at the bottom of the ocean?
It's a profound psychological dilemma. It raises an important question about how we draw the line between devotion and obsession.
Yeah.
Literature and cinema often frame carrying a torch as the absolute height of romantic loyalty.
Right. Think of Jay Gatsby standing on his lawn in the dark, staring longingly at the green light at the end of Daisy's dock across the bay.
We view that as a tragic, beautiful love. But psychologically, you're absolutely right. It can be a devastating paralysis. The fire gives off warmth, yes, but if you hold a burning torch in one place for too long, as the wood burns down, you eventually burn your own hands.
Oh.
You cannot build a new life. You cannot embrace a new relationship if your hands are completely full, keeping a fire alive for a ghost.
If you're listening to this, I think we all need to take a collective deep breath. We have been on quite the journey today. Let's bring everything together and summarize the incredible, turbulent landscape this vocabulary has just dragged us through.
It really is an epic journey from the very beginning to the very end. We started with the breathtaking, uncontrollable physics of being violently swept off our feet.
And the crushing, heavy impact of being smitten by the blacksmith's hammer.
From there, we panicked, and we tried to regain our footing by moving into the calculated cold economics of playing hard to get.
Artificially manufacturing scarcity to test the waters and protect our hearts. Then, we dropped the armor, committed to the storm by tying an unbreakable nautical knot, and we bound our hands together.
Only to face the cold, unglamorous intrusion of reality when the honeymoon phase finally ended, leaving us to navigate the dangerous, unpredictable waters of long-term commitment.
Waters that either ended in a violent, splintering, deafening shipwreck on the rocks, or a silent, invisible drifting apart across a calm ocean driven by subsurface currents.
And finally, standing completely alone in the pitch-black darkness, stubbornly holding a burning flame for a love that is already gone.
Remind yourself that understanding these idioms isn't just about expanding your vocabulary, it's about unlocking the profound historical tools needed to describe human emotion with absolute cinematic poetry.
The language we use is incredibly powerful. It shapes the contours of how we process the events of our own lives.
And that leads me to a final provocative thought I want to leave you with today, something to really mull over as you go about your day.
I love this part.
If our basic elementary vocabulary tells us that we simply fall in love like tripping gently on a sidewalk, but our advanced descriptive vocabulary insists that love is this epic landscape of medieval battles, ancient binding rituals, massive natural disasters, and maritime shipwrecks.
Wow.
We have to wonder about the fundamental power of words. Does our language merely describe our emotions after the fact? Or, by constantly using such intense, chaotic, violent vocabulary, do we actually train our brains to experience love as a more dramatic, uncontrollable force?
That is a staggering thought to consider. Does the language we use actively build the reality of the romances we live?
If we didn't have the words for a shipwreck, if we didn't have the concept of a massive collision, would a breakup actually feel less devastating? Does the vocabulary create the trauma?
It's the ultimate question of whether art imitates life, or life imitates the idioms we use.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We encourage you to continue exploring the hidden architecture and the buried history of the words you use every single day.
Keep questioning the vocabulary of your own life and the metaphors you use to define your own happiness.
And the next time you feel like you are walking on solid ground, fully in control of your Tuesday morning, remember sometimes that diagnostic X-ray machine of human emotion is entirely broken, and all it takes is a sudden, invisible rush of wind to take your feet completely out from under you.
Have you ever noticed that when a relationship gets, really messy, basic words just completely fail us?
Oh, absolutely. They just fall flat.
Right. I mean, imagine you're sitting on a couch trying to explain this absolutely catastrophic breakup to a friend.
Yeah.
And saying something like, they lied to me, or I really like them. It just feels utterly flat. It doesn't even begin to capture the sheer, unfiltered chaos you're actually experiencing in your chest.
No, it's standard English vocabulary suddenly feels like a blunt instrument in those moments.
Exactly. A blunt instrument. So what do we instinctively do? We start talking like we hold advanced degrees in theoretical physics,
Yeah, or we suddenly become aviation experts.
Right. We sound like 19th century puppeteers or something.
It's a profound linguistic shift because when the emotional stakes are pushed to their absolute limits, our everyday language simply cracks under the pressure.
It totally breaks down.
Yeah, so we are forced to scavenge from entirely different, often highly technical or deeply dramatic disciplines just to accurately map the internal landscape of human attachment and betrayal.
And that scavenging is really the foundation of our deep dive today. We're pulling from this incredible masterclass titled The Architecture of Romance.
Which is such a great title.
It really is.
Yes.
And it zeroes in on this advanced vocabulary. It's a brilliant look at how we use these extreme metaphors to describe the messy, passionate, and sometimes incredibly toxic reality of dating.
Yeah, we aren't dealing with the baseline today. We are looking exclusively at the extremes.
Totally.
The goal here is to unpack this ultimate linguistic toolkit. By dissecting these really vivid metaphors, we want to decode the complex psychology of human attraction and understand the dramatic dialogue that shapes our cultural narratives and perhaps, help you articulate your own emotional boundaries more clearly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we're tracking the life cycle of a romantic disaster, it never actually starts as a disaster, right?
No, of course not.
It has to begin with that overwhelming, intoxicating rush. And the source material starts right there. It examines how our language frames that total loss of physical and emotional equilibrium when you first lock eyes with someone.
Yeah, what we call falling head over heels.
Right. Head over heels. We say it so casually, right? Like all the time.
We do, but when you strip away the cliche and look at the actual mechanics of the phrase, it is steeped in the physics of momentum.
Yeah.
You are describing a violent inversion of the human body.
A violent inversion, right, because the imagery is literally tumbling down a massive, steep hill. Your center of gravity is entirely gone.
You're completely out of control.
You are. You're caught in a somersault, head under heels, over and over again, completely at the mercy of the slope. I mean, the source uses the example of a couple who meets, and within a week, they're breaking their leases and moving in together.
Right, they are swept up in this gravitational pull.
But I have to push back a little on how our culture romanticizes this. Because tumbling out of control down a mountain means you cannot stop yourself, even if you desperately wanted to.
Yeah, that's true.
So are we essentially describing a fundamental loss of human agency and just calling it romance?
Well, that is sort of the dark underbelly of the phrase. Yes, we are implicitly stating that infatuation is not a conscious choice.
Right.
You don't carefully decide to fall head over heels. It is a physical event that happens to you. Gravity just takes over.
Yeah.
When society agrees to use this specific terminology, we are basically granting the person a linguistic pardon for deeply irrational behavior.
A linguistic pardon. I love that phrase.
Right. We are saying, look at them. They cannot help themselves. They are in a state of free fall.
It almost feels like a built-in excuse, honestly. You give up the steering wheel to the universe like, I didn't mean to abandon all my friends and blow my savings on a trip to Paris after knowing this person for 4 days, but hey, I'm falling head over heels. It makes me wonder if having such a dramatic phrase readily available actually encourages us to act more recklessly.
It introduces a really fascinating chicken and egg scenario regarding our psychology. Does the language merely describe the neurochemical rush of new love? Or does having the idiom give us, subconscious permission to lean into the chaos?
That's a great question.
Regardless, the kinetic energy of that tumbling cannot be sustained indefinitely. Eventually, the momentum burns out.
You hit the bottom.
You reach the bottom of the hill.
And if you survive the fall without breaking your neck, the dynamic completely shifts. The source points out that you go from being subject to the laws of gravity, right, to being subject to the laws of anatomy.
Yeah.
You transition into being attached at the hip.
Right. We move from extreme kinetic movement to a static structural reality. When two people decide they want to spend every waking second together to the point of blurring their individual identities, we invoke this anatomical fusion.
Yeah, the masterclass gives this really specific example of two college friends, Sarah and Emily, where inviting one guaranteed the arrival of the other. You never saw them apart.
Right.
But think about the literal implications of that metaphor for a second. You are functioning as conjoined twins.
What's fascinating here is the implication for independent navigation.
Oh, totally.
If you are literally attached at the hip, independent trajectory is physically impossible. If one person wants to turn left, the other must yield and also turn left, or
you literally tear yourselves apart.
exactly, you both tear yourselves apart. You are forced to breathe, walk, and interact with the world as a single biological organism.
Which, I mean, initially that probably feels like the ultimate safe harbor, right?
Yeah.
Especially after the terrifying free fall of tumbling head over heels.
You'd think so, yeah.
You hit the bottom, you fuse together, and you think, great, total unity. But there's this really suffocating claustrophobia baked into that concept. You completely lose your autonomy.
Yeah.
And I'd argue that maintaining that level of synchronization is impossible because you aren't actually a blank slate.
Precisely. You are two individuals with distinct histories, and the friction of those histories is what usually shatters that anatomical fusion.
Which is the perfect pivot to the next phase of this toolkit.
Right.
Because being a single, synchronized organism only works if both people are, traveling light.
Right, absolutely.
You cannot maintain that delicate balance if one half of this fused organism is dragging dead weight from their old life.
Yeah.
That's when we start talking about carrying a lot of baggage.
Right. So here we abandon anatomy and adopt the vocabulary of transit and aviation.
Yeah.
The concept of emotional baggage is so ubiquitous it borders on invisible, but the source strips it down to its literal components to show how paralyzing it actually is.
The scenario painted in the masterclass is incredibly visceral. Picture being in a massive airport terminal. You hear the final boarding call for a fast, exciting new flight to a beautiful destination. That flight is a brand new, healthy relationship. The door is open.
Right.
But you are trying to sprint through the terminal, dragging 3 massive 50-kilogram suitcases. And they aren't filled with clothes. They're filled with heavy rocks.
The physical exertion in that imagery is crucial. The heavy luggage slows your momentum until forward movement becomes agonizingly slow, if not totally impossible.
Yeah.
In psychological terms, those rocks are the solidified remnants of unresolved emotional trauma.
It's the lingering paranoia from a partner who cheated,
Yeah.
right? Or the deep insecurities from a terrible divorce. It's basically a mental screenshot folder of every toxic text you've ever received, and you are lugging it to the new gate.
And that invisible weight actively degrades your present ability to love or trust. You are exhausted by the sheer effort of managing your own history.
Wow, yeah.
The man in the source's example, he's described as a genuinely kind person, but his trauma from a prior marriage makes him physically incapable of committing to his new partner.
That's where the deep tragedy of the metaphor really hits me. The new flight is right there. The engines are running. The new partner is literally waiting on the plane. But the person simply cannot board. Not because they don't want to, but because boarding requires relinquishing the luggage, and they refuse to let go of the handles.
No, they cling to the trauma. People often mistake their baggage for armor.
Oh, that's so true, armor.
They believe those heavy rocks of past experience will protect them from future pain. But they are completely blind to the fact that the luggage itself is the mechanism of their current suffering.
Right.
It is keeping them grounded in the terminal.
But, I struggle with the word baggage here.
Mm-hmm.
Does calling it baggage minimize the severity of it?
So...
Well, baggage sounds like something you just absentmindedly forgot to check at the counter, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about profound emotional scarring. By reducing trauma to a travel inconvenience, are we being unfair to the person carrying it?
That is a really sharp critique of the idiom. Labeling it baggage can certainly be reductive. It implies a quick fix, like just drop the bags and get on the plane, which totally ignores the grueling psychological work required to actually process betrayal.
Right. It's not that easy.
No, it's not. However, the metaphor effectively captures the impact on the new partner. The new partner only sees the impediment, not the invisible wounds inside the suitcase.
And what happens to that new partner? Because the source material takes a very dark turn here.
It really does.
When heavy baggage prevents real commitment, it doesn't always result in a clean, tearful goodbye at the boarding gate. Instead of letting the healthy person get on the flight alone, the damaged partner will often keep them trapped in the terminal in an endless, agonizing cycle of false hope.
This introduces a significantly more sinister layer to the linguistic toolkit. We cross the line from passive tragedy into active manipulation. We're talking about stringing someone along.
Yeah, we've completely left the airport now. We are in the realm of puppetry and, like, animal training. The masterclass defines this as intentionally deceiving someone over a long period with fake promises, keeping them intensely loyal without ever making the relationship official. It's manipulation purely for the sake of the manipulator's ego.
The psychological horror of this dynamic is brilliantly captured in the dual imagery the text provides. The first image is the puppet master holding the invisible strings of a marionette.
Ugh.
The marionette has no autonomy. Its movements, its emotional highs and lows are entirely dictated by the subtle, calculated twitches of the manipulator's fingers.
And the second image is even more brutal, I think. It's someone dragging a toy on a string just inches away from a chasing cat. They let the cat get incredibly close, and right as the cat pounces, they yank the string slightly out of reach. Over and over again.
The cruelty lies in the manufactured belief.
Yes. Manufactured belief.
The cat is exerting maximum physical and emotional effort because it genuinely believes it is about to catch the toy. The belief is the fuel. The person holding the string is manufacturing that belief with zero intention of ever relinquishing the prize. They are just feeding on the desperation.
That distinction is so important because unlike carrying baggage, which is tragic, but ultimately a passive inability to move forward, stringing someone along, requires an active, intentional architect.
Yes.
You are making a conscious choice to exhaust another human being for your own validation. It turns a shared romantic journey into a deliberate game of psychological dominance.
If we connect this to the broader applications of our language, the source material highlights that this phrase transcends romance. It maps perfectly onto deceptive business practices.
Oh, like the startup founder negotiating with investors.
Exactly. A founder might promise equity to a group of early angel investors, constantly assuring them that the paperwork is almost finalized.
Right.
This keeps the investors loyal, prevents them from funding rival startups, and keeps their capital in a holding pattern. Meanwhile, the founder is secretly using that leverage to negotiate a massive buyout with a venture capital firm.
So the founder is the puppet master. The finalized contract is the toy on the string, and the angel investors are the exhausted cat.
Yes, precisely.
It's remarkable how the precise emotional manipulation of a toxic romance translates flawlessly into financial deception. The mechanics of the cruelty are identical.
It really demonstrates the versatility of the vocabulary. But what occurs when these volatile elements begin to interact?
Oh boy.
What happens when a puppet master decides to fuse with someone carrying 50 kilos of rocks?
Right.
The source moves us into the chemistry lab to define the specific type of inevitability. We call it a recipe for disaster.
I love the contrast the masterclass uses here. When you bake a normal cake, you follow a recipe. You combine flour, sugar, and eggs, and the chemical reaction produces a cake. It's entirely predictable.
But the text contrasts that baking analogy with a toxic alternative. What is the guaranteed outcome of combining bleach, ammonia, and a lit match?
A catastrophic, highly toxic chemical explosion.
Right. So, to label a relationship a recipe for disaster is to state that the combination of these specific personalities, flaws, or circumstantial variables is mathematically guaranteed to result in a catastrophic failure.
Mathematically guaranteed. And the examples in the text are so painfully common. Like a woman whose ultimate life goal is to have 3 children, marrying a man who vehemently hates commitment and resents domesticity.
Yeah.
Or, outside of romance, handing the keys of a high-performance sports car to a teenager who just got their learner's permit. You look at the ingredients. You don't even have to wait for the reaction to happen. You know the explosion is imminent.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The crucial element of this metaphor is the perspective.
Okay.
The phrase relies on the objective reality of the outside observer. Friends, family members, or colleagues can clearly look at the ingredients and see the inevitable chemical reaction. Yet the two people inside the relationship are suffering from a profound cognitive dissonance.
Oh, absolutely. They genuinely believe they are mixing flour and sugar while everyone else in the room is watching them pour bleach into ammonia.
Yes.
It's a collective delusion. But chemistry doesn't care about your feelings, right?
Yeah.
It obeys its own laws. And when the explosion finally happens, the fallout is rarely private. The source outlines that the climax of this disaster is often deeply traumatic and intentionally public.
We reach the apex of betrayal in the vocabulary, the ultimate systemic collapse.
Being left at the altar.
Right. This is a heavy architectural and religious metaphor.
That is
arguably one of the most devastating structural phrases in the English language regarding human commitment.
The imagery is cinematic and just, horrifying. A bride in a stunning white dress, The sacred table at the very front of the church, 200 friends and family members seated in the pews. The organ music is playing.
Yeah.
The entire architecture of the event is fully realized. And then the groom never walks down the aisle. He panics and vanishes.
The defining characteristic of this idiom is the timing. It is the complete abandonment of a partner at the absolute last possible microscopic fraction of a second before a massive, life-altering commitment is formalized.
It's awful.
It is not just a breakup. It is a meticulously constructed humiliation.
But why wait until that moment? That's what I can't wrap my head around. The source calls it running away at the 99th percentile of the process.
Right.
If you realize you are in a recipe for disaster and you break up with the person 3 months before the wedding in your living room, that is heartbreaking. But it's private. Leaving them at the altar weaponizes the audience. It's a public spectacle of abandonment.
Well, you have allowed the architecture of the commitment to be built to the ceiling.
Yeah.
The financial investments are locked in, the social contracts are signed, the psychological expectations are at their absolute peak. You have marched your partner to the literal and metaphorical threshold of the sacred, and then you pull the foundation out from under them. The emotional devastation is infinitely compounded by the social destruction.
And much like the puppet master, this level of extreme betrayal translates directly into the corporate arena.
It does. The text draws a direct line to corporate mergers and acquisitions. Imagine two massive tech conglomerates. They have spent 18 months in grueling negotiations. Millions of dollars have been spent on legal counsel.
Right.
The regulatory boards have approved it. The press releases are queued up. And at 11:59 p.m., the night before the public signing, the acquiring company unilaterally pulls out of the deal without explanation, leaving the smaller startup's stock to instantly plummet.
They left the startup at the altar. The emotional trauma of a romantic betrayal perfectly encapsulates the devastation of a corporate collapse.
Exactly.
The agonizing pain of being abandoned at the 99th percentile is a universal human experience, regardless of whether you're holding a marriage license or a billion-dollar acquisition contract.
It relies on the perceived sanctity of the final step. When that threshold is violated at the final moment, the entire structure collapses, burying the victim in the debris.
So when the architecture collapses on top of you, and you somehow survive the public humiliation and the chemical explosion, what is the psychological aftermath? You are completely shattered. And according to the masterclass, this leads directly into a state of chaotic, unmoored freefall. We call it being on the rebound.
We pivot dramatically here, leaving religious architecture behind to borrow from the physics of a basketball court.
The visual is so stark.
Yeah.
Imagine the physics of a missed shot. A player shoots the basketball toward the hoop, aiming for a clean, satisfying score. But it's off target. It violently strikes the hard, unyielding metal rim.
And the kinetic energy of that violent impact dictates everything that follows.
Right.
The ball doesn't simply stop and drop to the floor. The impact sends it bouncing off the metal, shooting back into the air in a chaotic, entirely uncontrolled trajectory. It is spinning in absolute freefall, devoid of any directed purpose.
And while it's spinning aimlessly in the air, another player randomly jumps up and grabs it.
Translated to human psychology, being on the rebound describes the act of immediately entering a rushed, temporary new relationship solely to blunt the agonizing trauma of a catastrophic breakup.
Yeah.
You have violently collided with the metal rim of reality, and the pain is so immense that you enter an uncontrolled spin just to avoid hitting the ground.
What absolutely terrifies me about this metaphor is the complete lack of agency.
Oh, completely.
If you are on the rebound, you are the basketball. You are not the player running the court. You're just a sphere of chaotic energy bouncing aimlessly to avoid the cold, hard floor of loneliness. And the new partner, the person who reaches up and grabs you, they're entirely arbitrary.
Yes.
You aren't choosing them for their unique qualities. You are using them as a human landing pad.
This raises an important question about how we deploy sports physics to rationalize emotional instability. By describing an individual as a bouncing ball, are we once again excusing a certain level of collateral damage?
Right. Are we giving them another linguistic pardon?
Exactly. We are acknowledging that the person is not in a stable cognitive state to make a grounded, ethical decision. The new relationship is not a genuine connection. It is merely a reactionary vector of kinetic energy.
It's a survival mechanism masquerading as romance. We hear it all the time. Don't take his text too seriously. He just broke off a 5-year engagement last week. He is definitely on the rebound.
Right.
You are implicitly warning your friend, you aren't a human being to him right now. You are just the hands catching him before his ego shatters on the floor.
And that is precisely why the rebound rarely sustains itself. It is built entirely on the momentum of the previous failure rather than on the stable foundation of a new connection.
Yeah.
Once the kinetic energy from the impact dissipates, the artificial relationship simply falls apart.
We have mapped out an incredibly exhausting life cycle here. I mean, we've gone from the intoxicating, involuntary gravity of falling head over heels to the claustrophobia of anatomical fusion.
It's a lot.
We've dragged heavy rocks through the airport, been manipulated by puppet masters, sparked toxic chemical explosions, been publicly abandoned at the altar, and bounced violently off the metal rim of reality. It's a miracle anyone survives the process of dating.
It is the full, grueling spectrum of interpersonal chaos. But, the source material does not end in the debris. It leaves us with a final, vital stage of the linguistic journey.
Right. Because what happens when the chaotic bouncing finally truly stops? What happens years later when those massive 50-kilogram suitcases of rocks have finally been unpacked, processed, and left behind?
Yeah.
When the trauma is fully healed and suddenly, completely unexpectedly, that old chemistry returns.
This is where we arrive at the deeply poetic survivalist metaphor of rekindling an old flame.
The masterclass focuses on the concept of successfully reviving a passionate romantic relationship with the former partner after a vast period of separation.
Yes.
The example provided is two people who divorce amidst chaos in their early 20s, live entirely separate lives, and then run into each other 25 years later.
The metaphor strips away the modern world and relies on the deep ancestral imagery of a campfire. When a relationship undergoes a catastrophic breakup, the fire burns out. The logs are consumed, turning into cold, gray ash, and the surrounding emotional forest becomes dark, cold, and desolate.
But as any survivalist knows, appearances can be deceiving. If you look closely at a dead gray campfire sometimes, hidden deep underneath those thick layers of ash, there is one single, tiny, glowing orange coal.
Right.
It is barely alive, fighting for oxygen, but it is there. And if you carefully clear away the dead ash, add some fresh dry wood, and gently blow oxygen onto that single coal, the fire will rekindle. It will roar right back to life, providing warmth to the forest once again.
Notice the profound tonal shift in the vocabulary here.
It's staggering. I am marveling at the journey we've taken through these idioms. We spent the last hour dissecting the panic of bleach explosions, the cruelty of marionette strings, and the humiliation of public abandonment, and we end on something so incredibly gentle, deliberate, and life-saving, a campfire in the dark.
But if we synthesize the mechanics of this journey, a critical realization emerges. To successfully rekindle the flame without it instantly turning back into a recipe for disaster, a massive internal transformation must have occurred during those intervening years.
So what does this all mean practically?
Well, because if those two divorced 20-somethings ran into each other just 6 months later, they'd still be carrying the suitcases of rocks. It would just be a toxic rebound.
No, absolutely.
Exactly. The two individuals must have done the grueling psychological work to clear the ash. They must have finally dropped their heavy baggage. The long period of separation, those 25 years in the source's example, acts as the crucial dry wood and oxygen in the metaphor.
Right.
Time has provided the necessary space and maturity that allows a healthy fire to burn again without causing an uncontrollable, destructive forest fire.
The ash of their past mistakes has been cleared away to make room for oxygen. It is a deeply poetic concept. It proves that our English vocabulary for love isn't solely designed to map out trauma and betrayal. It possesses the immense capacity to beautifully articulate redemption, patience, and second chances.
It serves as a powerful testament to the intricate architecture of our language. To summarize our deep dive today, it is overwhelmingly clear that the English vocabulary for love does not merely rely on flat, basic emotional descriptors.
Not at all.
To accurately map the labyrinth of the human heart, we have instinctively borrowed from the dramatic tension of stage directors, the undeniable physics of gravity and momentum, the heavy sacred architecture of churches, the precise mathematical chemistry of explosions, and the primal survival tactics of tending a fire in the wilderness.
It is a vast cinematic landscape of language. And I want to turn this over to you. As we've unpacked this toolkit today, which of these vivid metaphors have you witnessed play out in your own life? Have you ever looked at two friends who started dating and instantly realized they were a walking recipe for disaster and you were just sitting there waiting for the bleach and ammonia to combust.
Or perhaps, applying this outside the realm of romance, have you ever witnessed a manipulative boss or a massive corporation stringing someone along for years, holding that promotion or that contract just out of reach, before finally leaving them at the altar when the deal was supposed to close? The applications of these mechanics are ubiquitous once you know how to look for them.
Think about the baggage you might be dragging into the terminal right now. But before we wrap up, there is one final, deeply provocative idea that builds on everything we've discussed today. A concept that pushes the boundary of our linguistic toolkit into some potentially unsettling territory.
Yes. The source material unequivocally proves that our advanced dramatic vocabulary shapes how we understand and articulate the complexities of our relationships. It gives us the precise tools to describe the chaos. But consider a deeper question regarding linguistic determinism.
Okay.
What if the dynamic works in reverse?
How do you mean?
Imagine a reality where our language completely lacked these intensely dramatic, cross-disciplinary metaphors. What if we only possess those basic flat words we discussed at the beginning of the show?
Right.
What if your vocabulary physically limited you to saying, I like them very much, or they were dishonest with me, without the ability to invoke tumbling gravity, burning chemical explosions, or public abandonment?
Oh, wow. So if we couldn't say we were head over heels, would we still feel the free fall?
That is the thought I want to leave you with. Would we experience the agonizing emotional pain and the euphoric joy of romance less intensely if we didn't have the cinematic words to magnify it?
That is wild.
Does the highly dramatic, structurally extreme vocabulary of the English language merely describe our relationship drama? Or does it, in some subtle, profound psychological way, actually create and amplify the very chaos we are desperately trying to survive?
Are we just acting out the drama that our own dictionary demands of us? That is going to keep me up at night. Well, the next time your relationship feels like you're tumbling down a mountain, or you're trying to catch a flight with suitcases full of literal rocks, you'll know exactly what the mechanics of that feeling are called. When the simple language breaks down, you now have the advanced toolkit to navigate the chaos. Keep observe the words you use, keep questioning the metaphors you live by, and above all, stay curious.